for being here today. We appreciate it. The first item of business that we have is a roll call so that we can establish a quorum officially. Will you please call the roll?
Chai-Lee,
Sorry, here.
Deb Barber, Quinn Galswick, Gracie George,
Here.
Amy Jorgensen,
Here.
Andrea Roffler,
Here.
Susan Vento,
Here.
Quinn Galswick. I see he's joined. Chair Johnson.
And I am here. Thank you, everyone. With that, we'll move on to approval of the agenda. We don't actually need a roll call vote on this. So I would just say, is there anyone that sees any changes to the agenda that should be made? Speak up if you have a change. All right, seeing none, then with no objection, the agenda has been approved. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. Those were sent out in advance, so hopefully everybody's had time to read them. Are there any changes to the minutes? Or maybe what I should do is first ask for a motion to approve and a second on the minutes.
Vento.
Moved by Vento. Is there a second?
Jorgensen second.
Jorgensen seconds. Thank you very much. Now, are there any changes or additions or edits to the minutes? All right, then. Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote on the approval of the minutes not amended.
Chai-Lee,
Aye.
Deb Barber,
Aye.
Quinn Galswick,
Approved.
Gracie George,
Aye.
Amy Jorgensen,
Aye.
Andrea Roffler,
Aye.
Susan Vento,
Aye.
Chair Johnson.
And aye. Thank you, everybody. We'll move on now to the next section of our agenda, which is business. And the first item under that is the State Auditor's Exit Conference. And Matt, do you want me to turn it over to you to introduce this at all? And I know we've got presenters then as well that we want to welcome.
Chair Johnson, members of the committee, I think I'll just turn it over to Stephanie Kuka, who is the director of the state audits team, and she can do an introduction and walk you through the results of the state audit.
Thanks, Matt.
Hi.
Welcome, Stephanie. Glad to have you here today.
Thank you. We are happy to be with you. I'm Stephanie Kuka, like Matt said, and with me is Aaron Try. We are here from the Office of the State Auditor to present the results of Metropolitan Council's 2020 audit. I do want to preemptively apologize. My allergies are very bad, so I'm sorry if I cough or sneeze during this at all. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so you can all follow along.
And just as a point of information, none of us would have received this in advance, so this is the first time we're seeing it as well, and it is being presented to us today. So in case you're wondering, I haven't seen that, that's normal. That's what the presentation's about.
Yes, so this is our audit report in draft form, and since it's in draft form, we cannot give you a copy to maintain, but once our report has been issued, you will all receive the finalized report. The first item is, we haven't included it in the packet, but the opinion that Metropolitan Council received for 2020 was an unmodified opinion, which is the most desirable. And then this first document in the packet is the required communication letter, and I will go through some highlights. So we have audited the financial statements of the governmental activities, the business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the Metropolitan Council as of and for the year ended December 31st of 2020. Our responsibility, as described by professional standards, is to express opinions about whether the financial statements prepared by management with your oversight are fairly presented in all material respects, in conformity with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. In planning and performing our audit, we considered the Metropolitan Council's internal control over financial reporting in order to determine our audit procedures, for the purpose of expressing our opinions on the financial statements and not to provide assurance on the internal control over financial reporting. Management is responsible for the selection and use of appropriate accounting policies. During 2020, the Metropolitan Council adopted new accounting guidance by implementing the provisions of Government Accounting Standards Board, GASB, Statement Number 85, which is for fiduciary activities, and establishes a criteria for identifying and reporting fiduciary activities. There were no other new accounting policies adopted, and the application of existing policies was not changed during 2020. Accounting estimates are an integral part of the financial statements prepared by management. They are based on management's knowledge and experience about past and current events and assumptions about future events. The most sensitive estimates affecting the financial statements include the following, and these are consistent with prior years, so I will not go through them in detail, but here are the significant estimates, and then the following is how the estimates were made, and again, it is consistent with the prior year. We evaluated the key factors and assumptions used to develop these estimates in determining they are reasonable in relation to the financial statements of each opinion unit. We encountered no significant difficulties in dealing with management in performing and completing our audit. Professional standards require us to accumulate all known and likely misstatements identified during the audit, other than those that are clearly trivial, and communicate them to the appropriate level of management. Management has corrected all such misstatements. In addition, none of the misstatements detected as a result of audit procedures and corrected by management were material, either individually or in the aggregate, to each opinion unit's financial statements taken as a whole. For the purpose of this letter, professional standards define a disagreement with management as a financial accounting, reporting, or auditing matter, whether or not resolved to our satisfaction, that could be significant to the financial statements or the auditor's report. We are pleased to report that no such disagreements arose during the course of our audit. The management representation letter has not yet been sent. The opinion date should be set either yet this afternoon or tomorrow, and once that is set, we will send out the management letter for the appropriate signatures. In some cases, management may decide to consult with other accountants about auditing and accounting matters, which is similar to obtaining a second opinion on certain situations. To our knowledge, there were no such consultations with other accountants. This last item, significant new accounting pronouncements, is just here for your reference. GASB Statement Number 87, leases. It is effective for calendar dates 2022, but Metropolitan Council will implement for 2021 in order to implement with the state of Minnesota. GASB has changed the standards as they apply to leases, and this will result in an increase of leased assets and liabilities required to be reported by state and local governments, which may increase or decrease the entity's net position. The Metropolitan Council staff is already very aware of this new requirement and has been implementing this standard. Excuse me. The next report is the report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standards. In planning and performing our audit of the financial statements, we considered the Metropolitan Council's internal control over financial reporting as a basis for designing audit procedures that are appropriate in the circumstances for the purpose of expressing our opinions on the financial statements, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of the internal control. We do not express an opinion on the effectiveness of the Metropolitan Council's internal control over financial reporting. A deficiency in internal control over financial reporting exists when the design or the operation of a control does not allow management or employees in the normal course of performing their assigned functions to prevent or detect and correct misstatements on a timely basis. A material weakness is a deficiency or combination of deficiencies in internal control over financial reporting, such that there's a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement will not be prevented or detected and corrected on a timely basis. A significant deficiency is a deficiency or combination of deficiencies in internal control that's less severe than a material weakness, yet important enough to merit the attention of those charged with governance. We did identify a deficiency in internal control over financial reporting, which is described in the accompanying schedule of findings and question costs as item 2020-001, which we consider to be a significant deficiency. And we will go over that in more detail in a few moments. The results of our test disclosed no instances of noncompliance or other matters that are required to be reported under government auditing standards. For Minnesota legal compliance, nothing came to our attention that caused us to believe that the Metropolitan Council failed to comply with the provisions of the contracting and bidding, deposits and investments, conflicts of interest, claims and disbursements, and miscellaneous provisions sections of the Minnesota Legal Compliance Audit Guide for other political subdivisions, insofar as they relate to accounting matters. Additionally, we tested for compliance with the authority to issue public debt. The next report is the report on compliance for each major federal program, the report on internal control over compliance, and report on the schedule of findings, schedule of expenditures of federal awards required by the uniform guidance. We have audited the Metropolitan Council's compliance with the type of compliance requirements described in the U.S. Office of Management and Budget Compliance Supplement that could have a direct and material effect on the Metropolitan Council's major federal program for the year ended December 31st of 2020. Management is responsible for compliance with federal statutes, regulations, and the terms and conditions of its federal awards applicable to its federal programs. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on compliance for the Metropolitan Council's major federal program based on our audit of the types of compliance requirements referred to above. In our opinion, the Metropolitan Council complied in all material respects with the types of compliance requirements referred to above that could have a direct and material effect on its major federal program for the year ended December 31st of 2020. Management of the Metropolitan Council is responsible for establishing and maintaining effective internal control over compliance with the types of compliance requirements referred to above. Excuse me, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control over compliance that we consider to be material weaknesses. This last section is on the report on the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, or the CFA, required by the uniform guidance. The accompanied schedule of the expenditures of federal awards is presented for the purpose of additional analysis and is not a required part of the basic financial statements. In our opinion, the CFA is fairly stated in all material respects in relation to the basic financial statements taken as a whole. And then Aaron is going to go over the next section.
All right, thank you. As Stephanie said, we issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. There was no material weaknesses identified and no noncompliance material to the financial statements noted. We did note one significant deficiency, which I will talk about here momentarily. For the federal awards, there was no material weaknesses identified and no significant deficiencies. We issued an unmodified opinion on the compliance for major federal programs, and the major federal program for 2020 was the Federal Transit Cluster. The Metropolitan Council qualified as a low-risk auditee for 2020 as well. So there was one finding. This was a finding from last year as well, related to access to computer systems. We tested 25 employees who left employment from council during 2020. Of those tested, there was 2 individuals whose access wasn't revoked until 14 days or more after the departure date. And there was also 5 employees where there was no request noted made to IT. For some context, there is some backup processes to remove access, but there's no audit trail, so we're not able to verify when their access was revoked. We do recommend that the council implement additional procedures to ensure the removal of a terminated employee's network access in a timely manner. As I said, no findings for federal award programs, and one finding from last year was revolved, and that related to contract compliance. We did receive the council's corrective action plan, and the plan is for human resources to audit to ensure managers are filling out the form per the council's procedures, and also having the IS team disable accounts based on the separation date, and then having that process transfer to the PeopleSoft and into the account expiration field and Active Directory. We also received the representation of the Metropolitan Council for the summary schedule of prior audit findings. As I noted, there was the access to computer systems, and that is, again, a finding this year. And then the contract compliance, which was resolved in 2020. Next is the CIFA. It looks a little different this year. In prior years, each contract number would be issued under the direct programs, but this year it's all aggregated, so it's a lot shorter. And it still meets all the requirements, of course. This year, the total federal awards was $458,561,000. This compares to last year, which was $216,836,000, so it's more than double. And primarily that is because of all the CARES money received in 2020 that council got. Stephen notes, which are again very similar to prior years.
All right, are there any questions?
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation. So I'll turn it over to the committee. Does the committee have any questions right now? And I have to scroll through. So I see Councilmember Lee. Go ahead with your question. And then Councilmember Barber.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I had a question about the computer access, or that might be related, but it made me think of the if we have employees who have access cards for physical buildings and facilities, do we do something similar, or did the investigation look into the same issue with folks who have left employment, but maybe we should have, or maybe forgot to deactivate their access cards to buildings? Thank you.
I might refer this question to Aaron, but I don't believe that testing their access on the cards was a part of this testing. No.
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with the issue for the IT access, was the effect of the pandemic and COVID and work from home and some of the strains that were being felt by the IT system maybe contributed somewhat to this, or is this just or contributed to it not being resolved after last year's audit, I guess, and did we see any different trends related to remote working in that kind of environment?
From our point of view, this finding is very consistent with last year. So it doesn't seem to, the remote working doesn't seem to have affected it at all, but that might be a better question for Metropolitan Council staff. But when we inquired of it, that didn't seem to be something that they were concerned about.
Matt, do you want to jump in at all on that?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, this is an issue we've been monitoring for a number of years. It's probably worth considering, and I'd probably defer to either Marie Henderson or Craig Vance on the line if they have any opinions on whether remote work has contributed to the continuance of this finding, but it is something that we've been tracking as a council, management, and our audit department for a number of years. and we'll continue to, frankly. So I'll defer to either of those two if they're on to comment if they'd like to.
Are there any other comments from Met Council staff on this?
Madam Chair, this
Go
is
ahead.
Marie Henderson, acting CFO. As Matt alluded to, this is an issue that we have been working on for a few years to get this resolved. Part of probably the 2021 to 2022, we do have a new CIO, and taking this obviously very seriously and making sure that as soon as HR has that information and putting it onto the manager's responsibility to fill out that paperwork as soon as possible. Instead of having a two-step process in having the manager contact both HR and IS, we're going to be collaborating and having a one-step system in hopes that, well, have the system then automate this process and having an Active Directory system that will terminate employees in a timely manner.
Thank you. Is there anything else on that? I really appreciate that, Marie, and thank you too, Matt. We chatted about this before the meeting today, and just holding people accountable, making the system more streamlined. Sorry, barking dog. Is on the right track for sure, but it's something that's been dogging us for a little while. So I appreciate the efforts on that. Are there any other questions from the committee? And again, I can't see everybody unless I scroll through, so.
I can
Madam
stop sharing,
Chair.
maybe that will help.
I have a question.
Yeah. Madam Chair.
Committee Member Jorgensen and then Committee Member Galsworth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions. I didn't catch, so how many years in a row has this been a finding? I know it's been at least 2, but can somebody definitively state how many years in a row?
Yep, it's been 2 years that it's been a written finding.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is for the state auditor, how many years in a row have you been performing the audit for the Met Council, and how many years in a row have you done an unmodified opinion?
Like me personally, how long have I been?
The state auditor's office.
Oh, I will have to check into how long the state auditor's office has been auditing the Metropolitan Council. This is my 11th audit with the Metropolitan Council, and it has been unmodified all 11 years.
Thank you.
Matt, do you happen to know how long the state auditor's been auditing us?
I don't know offhand. I think it's
Madam Chair, I can look into it and give Matt my update, and he can update all of you if that is appropriate.
Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great. I appreciate it.
And Madam Chair, I just want to also add that state statute is dictated that the Metropolitan Council is to be using the state auditors, and we can check how long that statute has been in place. But we are different than counties and the state themselves. But we.
Thank you, Marie. Committee Member Galswick. I hope did I say that right, Quinn? Did I
You
get your
did.
last?
Thank you.
Thank you. Just making sure.
Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a hard one. The double A throws everyone off. So I want to take a step back from the particular issue and ask a little bit about your approach. Just because in your presentation you talk about the internal controls, and I just want to be clear, what level of detail do you go into in reviewing IT general controls, and do you rely on those as part of your opinion, or is it more of a higher level check to see that there's some basic controls in place, things like access management? So where do you draw that line on that?
Aaron, do you want to kind of talk about our audit approach that we went through this year? Maybe some of the areas that we had tested.
For IT.
IT, yeah.
We generally test applications. So we test like the PeopleSoft financial system who has access, and then also for terminated employees, we'll get a sample of all the employees terminated in the year, and then select a sample of those to see when and how their access was revoked.
Okay. So
and we look at. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We'll rotate looking at the different systems that the Metropolitan Council uses. Always looking at their PeopleSoft, their financial system, and then looking at some of the other systems they use, like TXBase, Oracle WAM, those types of systems, and then we look at access, we look at if the access is appropriate, and we contact the IT staff at Metropolitan Council, and they prepare for us a lot of the documentation on what are their major controls in place, and then we will test the controls that they have provided to us to make sure that they are operating properly.
Good. Clarifying question, Madam Chair. So just so I understand then, so would you, from your, with your audit approach, if there are problems with the IT controls, does that change your ability to issue your opinion, or is the work that you're doing on the financial statements and confirming the balance sheet, et cetera, is that sufficient where if, let's say, the IT controls were all terrible, would you still be able to issue your opinion?
That was a great question. I have not run into that before, but I would say it would, if there were a lack of internal controls, that would probably affect whether we could issue. I guess I'm not certain whether it would affect if we could issue unmodified opinion or if it would affect the amount of work we would have to do in order to rely on the financial information. So it might just increase the amount of work we would have to do. It's definitely something I would have to think about. Again, I've never run into a situation like that.
Okay. And then one last question, if I may. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the last question would be on infrastructure. So do you look at any of the underlying infrastructure controls, or is it just at the application level?
So the Metropolitan Council as a whole?
When you're doing this work, so for like the PeopleSoft system, you're looking at any of the underlying servers or anything of that nature?
Oh, so just related, you're still talking related to IT specifically?
Yes, I am.
Aaron, do you have any, can you clarify exactly, I guess, what you're...
Sure, and I'm not trying to belabor the point, just trying to figure out what you looked at and just trying to get an understanding of, where we can put some reliance and feel some comfort on controls because you looked at it and there were no issues versus where there was an issue. So just trying to understand for like at the PeopleSoft application, if you're looking at the access management, did you look at who had access to the underlying servers or anything of that nature or configurations, those types of things? Or is it more just the access review at the application level than application level controls? Does that make sense? And we can take this offline too, if that'd be easier as well.
When we look at who has access, we're provided with a report straight from the system that shows who has access to do essentially what functions within the system. So we can see, like in PeopleSoft, who can add a vendor or who can approve a journal entry. So we can look through at that level of detail as to who has access to that. But it might, I guess if you have further questions, it might be easier to talk offline.
Yep, that's fine by me. So I think I got a handle on it, but we can talk offline if need be. But thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Great questions too, by the way. So we'll dig deeper on that and circle back and make sure we get that question fully vetted. Is there anything else from committee members you have? At this point in time, again, I am scrolling through the screen to see if anyone has their hand up. If you do have something to say, just unmute and go ahead. All right then, seeing no other questions at this point. Oh, go ahead.
Can I just have one asking Stephanie just to clarify. So I know the committee members get a number of different reports in the next few days. Could you just explain to them what they're going to see? Like, because I know there's several that come through, and I always get questions about what are the difference between these. And then just touch on who gets them, because I think sometimes I get 15 copies of this that people forward me, and so it's been a question that's come up over the years, and we always forget to address it now. Maybe if you could just talk about that. So that's a question for Stephanie, and then I'll just say to the committee members, if you have further questions for the state auditor, you can run them through me, and I can forward them on to Stephanie, and just it actually be helpful for me to do it that way, so we have a chain of of the question and answer, so we can use it in our risk assessment as well. So Stephanie.
So the one item that you will all receive, all of the members of the audit committee, excuse me, is called the management letter. And that is what the majority of what we went through today is. And it doesn't, except for that first document. The first document we went through was called the required communication letter, and that is separate from the management letter. Another report that gets issued is the opinion, and the opinion only goes to a handful of people at the Metropolitan Council because it actually gets inserted into the comprehensive annual financial report. And so I guess I don't know how the distribution of the report works for the audit committee, but I would guess that you all receive a copy of the comprehensive annual financial report, and the opinion is at the beginning of that report. So that's how you would be provided that information.
Did that answer all of your questions, Matt?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks.
Okay, great. All right. Any last questions on this? Now, at this stage, I'm just going to check in. We've got it as a business item. Is there any official action you need from the committee at this time?
Not on the state auditor's exit conference, but item 2 under business audit plan, the amendment, yes.
Okay, great. That is what I thought. Well, thank you very much again, Stephanie and Aaron, for being here. We really appreciate your hard work. And to our staff at Met Council too, making sure that we're doing things the way we should be, correcting the things where we need attention. And again, to Matt and the whole team, thank you for making this what seems to be a really great process with the state and from year over year. So that is it. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the audit plan for 2021 of June. And we've got amendments that we'll go over. And at this point, I will turn it over to Matt.
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I just wanted, before everybody logs off that's just here for unless Aaron's leaving, just recognize Marie Henderson, Mohammed Omar, Steve True, Dave Johnson, and Petrie. They're the ones that really do the work with the state audit team. There's a number of other people that contribute. I'm really just in the meeting, so I don't want to appreciate the credit, but it's not mine. It should go to the people who are, a number of other people who are in the room and really have made responding to the state audits kind of a science. So appreciate all their work. So the next item will be a quick amendment to our 2021 audit plan. In a brief refresher, you as a committee approved this plan last fall. Initially, we brought it back in February for a minor adjustment and added a couple items. This is another relatively small amendment to reflect some work that we've been asked to do in the last couple of months that we're currently working on. And so I just want to make sure it's reflected in the plan before we get too far into the work and talk a little bit about what these two projects are. So the first one, and if you look at the audit plan, it's way to the back. We haven't amended anything within the first 10 pages. It's really just on the last page 11 and the last 2 pages. Under Metro Transit, we've added 2 items. The first is Minneapolis Transit Management Organization consultation. And this is really just some work we're doing with the group that oversees our CMAQ grant. It's a federal grant, congestion mitigation air quality. We have several transit management organizations in the metropolitan area that do work related to promoting transit and alternative means to driving in the metropolitan area. We've done work in the past with the TMOs just in terms of ensuring oversight and conformance with federal requirements. One of the TMOs actually merged with the Minneapolis Regional Chamber over the past few years. And so we've just been working with the grant managers to help ensure that process is done in a way that still conforms with all the federal requirements, including some in-kind matching requirements. So this is really just a support project for us. We've been in on some of the discussions, help generate questions and reviewing some documentation to help support our partners at Metro Transit and the council. The second item is local agency security officer contract review. This is shortened to the term LASSO. It's a required position that helps our police department ensure that we comply with what's called CJIS. It's Criminal Justice Information System. I realize I'm doing a lot of acronym spinning today. And we were just asked to look into this contract. It's one that we've had for a while. worked with this vendor for a while, and there has been some reports that we were getting behind in the contract. We were having some sole sourcing, some late contract payments, some things like that. So we were asked to just look into this contract and make sure that we're conforming. This one is an audit, and we will be bringing this one to audit committee when we're done with findings and recommendations. So those are just the two additions. Just for information, I expect that we'll probably do a more wholesale update to the audit plan in the fall. I'm not sure that we'll do our entire risk assessment and a wholly rewriting the plan, because we still have a number of items to complete. However, at that time, we'll probably take out some of the items. We'll revisit a few that maybe have lost, aren't as risky, and we can maybe remove from the plan, and also just trim out some work that we've completed. So with that, I'd stand for any questions and ask for your approval of our updated audit plan.
Thanks, Matt. Turning back to the committee, are there any questions for Matt? I am hearing none, and I am seeing no hands up or. Okay, so no further discussion on that. Do I have a motion then to approve the agenda, the amended 2021 audit plan?
Vento moves
Barber.
approval.
It's moved by Vento, seconded by Barber. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then roll call vote, please.
Chai Lee,
Aye.
Deb Barber.
Aye.
Quinn Gulswick,
Aye.
Gracie George,
Aye.
Amy Jorgensen,
Aye.
Andrea Roffler,
Aye.
Susan Vento,
Aye.
Sarah Johnson.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. Thanks, Matt. Now we'll move on to the information section of our agenda. And with that, we have our director's reports. I'll turn it back to Matt.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So my first, before I get started here, I'd like Tang to turn his camera on. I told him that he was going to have to do this. So the newest member of our audit team is Tang Ming Lo, and he joined us on June 7th, and he is joining to primarily work as an internal auditor and IT auditor for us. He'll work with Kevin, Elia, and a number of the IT projects that we have ongoing. And I think just as we highlighted just in the last state audit report, IT has really become an area that we're trying to focus on more and more, as it's becoming more of a critical audit area, and obviously given a lot of the reports of ransomware and other things, a high risk area for the council. So we thought it important to get another audit staff member with IT experience. He comes to us from UNFI, which, if you don't know UNFI, it's basically Cub Foods. And he's where he served as an internal auditor and IT auditor. And before that, he worked for Bremer Bank, the Minnesota Department of Revenue, Ramsey County Attorney's Office, among other positions. He has a BA in economics and completed the cybersecurity boot camp at the University of Minnesota. And he's currently working toward his completion of Master of Science Cybersecurity Information Assurance from Western Governors University, as well as pursuing a CISA and Security Plus certifications. So welcome, Tang. And Tang, just say hi. So I can't see you on my screen, but maybe.
Hey, everyone. What you guys are
There he
doing
is.
today?
Well, welcome, Tang. We're really excited to have you at Met Council. Glad you're with us today. Good to see your face. Someday we'll all see you in person, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to say?
I'm just glad to be here. Just ready to get to it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that introduction, Matt. We really appreciate it.
We expect to have another open position in the next few months. We're working with our partners in HR to just update job descriptions and make some decisions about what level we'll hire that position. And we'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks. Normally, I would probably be introducing our new round of interns, but we had less success hiring interns this spring as we have in other years. I think that's partially a pandemic issue. It's probably partially a job market issue. But we didn't get any qualified applicants to hire. We are fortunate that Brenda Bargefield has continued with us, and she's actually here today in the office. I actually saw her. I met her in person for the first time today, which is weird because it's been over a year. So we are considering posting again in the fall. Normally we hire through the summer, and then our interns stay on through the school year. Sometimes we've had some success having people come on at the beginning of the school year, graduate students that have interned through the summer and they're looking for something else to work on through the school year. So we'll try again in the fall probably, and have Brenda as long as she's willing to stay. Another note that probably most of you saw, but maybe not everybody, Mary Bogie was named Regional Administrator on June 9th. She had been acting in that position for well over a year since Meredith Vadas left for the state's COVID testing program. Just wanted to point that out because I report administratively to Mary and meet with her bi-weekly and work with her on a lot of administrative things around the council, like hiring and positions and budget and things like that. So we're all very excited to continue to work with Mary. She's a great public servant and wonderful to work with. So a note for you all as committee members. We've talked about this before, but we still plan to stagger the terms of the community members of the council or of the audit committee. We started the process with some of the council staff that work with the council, the actual council, capital C council, to work on how that appointment's going to take place. We have a couple of options in terms of how this is going to work, and I know a few of you, the last time I asked this question, volunteered to be reappointed. We do have to go through a process. We can't just simply reappoint. We have to actually post and go through a process. So we're thinking through how that might work. We're thinking through whether we should do it now or whether we should wait till the end of the 4-year terms and do it then, and then appoint as 2 people to a 4 and 2 people to a 2. I probably would like to engage with a few of you community members to kind of gauge your interest on how long you would like to serve or be willing to serve. We do have a provision in the audit committee charter that says that community members can only serve 2 terms. So we have to think through that would limit some people to 6 years. We could think about maybe waiving that, or we could think about adjusting that. I do expect that we'll come back to the council with an amendment to the audit committee charter to make some changes around this language. I think when we wrote it, it wasn't quite clear enough. So we're going to bring that back as well, just to provide some clarity over how the appointments are made and what the terms look like. So more to come on that. I just wanted to highlight that we haven't forgotten. These are things that take a little bit of time, and we want to think through exactly what the best way to work that out is. If you have any questions, you can ask me at the end of this or offline as well. COVID-19 update, or just a general update. The team continues to primarily telework. As you can probably see, I'm in the office today. I think this is day number 5 total. I'm going about once a week, which for me is very helpful. I find it very nice to get to see some of my coworkers once in a while. Kevin and Brenna are here today. So for some of us, it's been really nice to get back in the office, if not that often, at least occasionally. I think we'll probably be looking at something more robust in the fall, like a lot of organizations. But we've largely been successful at telework. I think that there's been, as a lot of us are probably finding, certain things can move a little bit slower, it seems. And some of that's just getting access, and people just always feel very busy. But we're working through it, and probably by after Labor Day, we'll have a few more of us back in person. So I continue to serve on the incident command structure for the council. I've been the planning chief now for about 15 months since the beginning of the pandemic. We are starting to wind down a little bit. We've started to have that conversation about when does the incident command structure end and when do we go back to normal operating business. I expect that that'll probably take place sometime over the summer. One of our big charges as planning chiefs was to think about how to slowly bring people back to the office. And as I'm here, we're starting to do that. And so the next step is really more the large scale bringing staff back. And we just have to decide at what point does that just become normal operating business and less of an incident command issue. So we're working through that. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll be sort of standing down our role as planning chiefs and handing back any responsibilities we have there. And I will be very happy just to focus on my day job. Getting to some of our audit work, you just heard about the state audit, the completion of the state audit. In terms of external audits, we have an IRS bond audit that is still ongoing. And actually, I late after I kind of published this report, I do have some results of the FHW MPO audit. I might just send that to you offline. I haven't even had a chance to really go into detail and review it yet, so I will. I'll send those to this committee. If I recall, there was no major findings. It was largely a good result, and that audit is typically more like suggestive things. But you'll see that in the coming days. In terms of our internal audit plan, you'll hear about the technology asset management audit today. It's completed, and we finished a police benchmarking consultation, which is really just a research project looking into what other police agencies do in terms of information sharing. Open source information, we just looked on, basically did some web searching with some of our interns to find information, provide that to the Metro Transit. We have a lot of work ongoing. We have audit and electric bus procurement, the C line that is nearing completion. We're just following up on a few last issues. We continue to support the council in the Southwest Light Rail by reviewing change orders and pay-ups for the civil construction contract, as well as supporting them with certain tasks and review of federal provisions when they need a second look on things. Working on audit of MnDOT funding agreements, workers' compensation, transit facility security, Metro Transit safety. And by safety, I mean more employee safety, not on the rails safety or buses safety. It's more how we're complying with internal safety requirements. I mentioned the TMO consultation, the LASSO contract review, a contract negotiation, which is our non-standard agreement audit, and some work with our communications department as they are looking at auditing their own processes and communications. So a lot going on. As you can see, the team has been hard at work. This is, we are probably very close to being done with a lot of these, and by the next committee, we should have a pretty full agenda of work that we'll be reporting on some capacity or another. I've talked to you as a committee about follow-up. I'll talk about this in a second too, but our database is largely operational. The last few weeks, we've been actually just vetting through the data, doing some comparisons to our folders, making sure everything is updated and accurate in terms of a data integrity standpoint, and also working with IS on reporting of our work, findings, and follow-up and recommendations. I hope to have more quantitative results. We're just not quite there yet. We're still working through some bugs on the reporting and updating the information. We do have, I expect that this section will continue to be a place where we'll have quantitative and qualitative results, and also a little discussion of time that we'll devote to follow-up, because I know those are questions you've asked. We do have a couple of areas, the parks, payroll, ES stock rooms that we have been tracking and are considering potential for follow-up testing. We haven't made any final decisions on any of those quite yet. We'll probably by the next committee meeting, we'll have a little more robust discussion here about follow-up activities. Another section of this report that I'm going to start reporting more quantitatively, fraud and ethics investigations. There's been a lot of discussion at management committee about getting more information about our investigative work. We are considering how to best contribute to that report overall at the council of how we're doing investigations. And then in this section, I'd like to just focus on fraud and ethics for this committee. So again, it's sort of the same thing with the other data. It's something we're working through in terms of quantitative, how we'll present this, thinking through the data practices, ramifications here. Just for this committee right now, we've been primarily contracting with third parties to complete our investigations, and we completed 2 related to workers' comp fraud this spring, and we have 1 ongoing that is more of a personal use of benefits type investigation. The strategic plan, we've started our strategic plan last year. It's on the audit plan. We've picked that up again. It's one of those tasks that got a little bit set aside because of the pandemic and just some other priorities. But Julia Quayle and I have been refocusing on developing our draft goals and objectives. I expect that we would like to engage this committee, members in our strategic planning process in some way. At a minimum, in the next few weeks, you'll probably hear from me via email with a draft. And I am open to a few different options in terms of how to best accomplish getting your feedback. If there are people besides me you'd like to hear from, if there's questions you have, if there's a session we want to schedule special for our department, we want to make sure that our department is focused on reducing the risk for the council in the best way we can. And we want to put that in writing in a strategic plan form along with a staffing plan that'll help us achieve those goals. So more to come on this. We probably over the course of the next 2 to 3 months, we'll come up with a strategy where we'll engage both you as a committee, our senior leadership, as well as some of the members of our team in developing our strategic plan. And for certain, it'll come back to this committee for approval. So I just want to make sure that when we do that, you feel like you've seen it before and you've been engaged in the process to the extent you want to be. Ethics compliance, we rolled out our ethics point reporting tool last fall, and it has been largely successful, I think, in terms of implementation. I don't receive all the complaints, but I received some of them. The last one I received was complaint number 45. So within 6 to 8 months, we've had nearly 50 complaints come through the system. Some are very relevant. Some are just, they're not exactly what we were hoping for within an ethics compliance system, but we're continuing to work through how we can better advertise, some behind the scenes work with updating policies and procedures, and updating our processes for how we make sure that system also has valid and updated data. So more to come on that. The database I mentioned, we're continuing to work with IS and within our department to make that system effective. And then within our department, we're working on updates to our audit manual, work instructions templates, work that's kind of just continuous improvement as we all sort of gain experience and work with each other, and to make sure that we're up to speed and in conformance with IAA. So that's all I have. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thanks, Matt. So I'll turn it back to the committee. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for the database that you developed, I can't remember if we talked about this before, but did you end up doing like an in-house solution, or did you purchase a solution for a database? Could you speak to that a little bit, please?
Committee Member Jorgensen, we had developed an in-house solution. We considered Teammate or other external solutions, but I think just the way our team operates, we thought that just developing a relatively simple, a tool that would have sort of cross-tabbing and reporting functionality would work for us. So we worked pretty closely with a developer in IS. IS is our information services department. To develop this tool that both it tracks dates. So just within a project, we have the team stamp dates when they go through certain gates, like we've had our entrance conference, or we're completed testing, or we've reported audit committee. And then there's also a separate function that includes all findings and then recommendations along with dates that they were closed out, so we can report on when, how many recommendations are still open, if they've been closed, etc.
Then just one follow-up question, Madam Chair. So will we, I know you talked about timelines and things, but can we get a pretty firm commitment from you that the next audit committee meeting will have a more full report about prior audit findings and kind of where we're at?
Yeah, we are actually pretty close to getting I'll say the integrity of the data. So Tammy went into our files and pulled everything into the report, and it takes kind of really my eye to go through and okay, so there's some projects where we have folders that we started and they get rolled into another project along the line. So there's just some things like that need to be tidied up. We had some, it's just an issue with the database where it's not, for some reason, some of the recommendations are not pulling into the reports. So we have tabs. It's like any internal audit open recommendation, we can pull it. We can spit it out in a report. Put that in Excel or any other tool. And it's just some bugs we have to work through. I expect that to be done at the minimal by the end of the summer, and we will, by our next committee meeting, I'll pledge to you, we'll have more detail on that function.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions. Anything else? Any comments or questions from the committee?
Chair Johnson.
Go ahead, Committee Member Goswick. Go ahead.
Thank you. Auditor Latour, so I want to talk a little bit about the ethics and compliance, the ethics point line. So you made the comment that you are not receiving all of the reports. Could you speak to who is receiving the reports? I know you're still working through some of the process flow, et cetera, but are there plans for you to at least have visibility in what those reports are, even if your team's not acting on it? Or what do you see the kind of long-term setup there?
Committee Member Goswick, that's a really good question. So there are about 15 issue types within Ethics Point, including an other, that a reporter can select. I get anything related to fraud, I think data practices, a couple other categories. If it's discrimination, it goes to Cy Jordan, the director of OEO. If it's anything HR related, so it's like respectful workplace, forget all the issue types and how they're worded, but those types of investigations that would normally, or complaints would typically go to an HR function, go to Marcy Simon, the director of HR. So when I say I don't get all of them, I get the ones that are assigned to me. So there's only 3 of us that receive all of the complaints. Julia and Tammy are super users. So Julia Quell, who's my audit manager, is a super user. We can see everything. We've been, it's one of the things we'd like to work through as to what role should we be playing in terms of ensuring that people are following up. And some of this is, it's a new system. And so people are just not used to going back in and closing out an investigation or complaint. And so, what's our role to just sort of like, hey, you got to go back in and close this out. But I think somebody needs to. We need to have that accountability. We've heard it a couple times in meetings that we've had or town halls that we've done on this topic. The people they'd like to see results, how many complaints are we getting, in what areas, and they want to know that somebody is responding in some way. Even if it's not a related topic, somebody should be going back in the system and saying, we received this, we're going to forward it on to customer service or whoever. So we're going to be looking at that as how is the best approach? Is that really an audit function, or should there be somebody who should do this? That's, we don't have an ethics officer per se at the council. So is there space for that to happen, or who should it be?
For me?
Go ahead.
Thank you. That helps a lot, Matt. My humble opinion on this, or something to think about, is I think it's really good that you do have access to view all of the items. I think however you end up designing that, I would recommend that you continue to try to have that, if for no other reason, just oversight to see if there's trends or see if there's some problem areas that might inform your risk assessments. But I do agree with you that I think it would be better if we were able to place the responsibility for ensuring that those are addressed more within some sort of compliance function or whatever that might be, instead of making that a regular audit function, so that you have the ability to provide oversight that is being done correctly.
Right.
My 2 cents. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? So Matt, just to follow up on that point, and then the point earlier regarding the audit, where we had some deficiencies, are there ways to build in our systems where there are, automatic reminders that will ping people back? Like, you've got an unfinished piece of work here that needs to be addressed. I know so many systems now have that. Do our systems sufficiently have that type of loop that can be closed, via, technology, rather than having people have to go back in systems and manually check to see if things are done or if the proper procedures have been followed with whatever it relates to?
Yeah, Madam Chair, it's a good question. I think at this point, the system doesn't automatically generate an email to anybody. We did design a color coding system where any date that's stale, like I used to the GAO used to use this term stale date. If we're past a date that something's due, it turns yellow or red. And so if anybody opens up the system, they can instantly look and see, okay, which dates are overdue, who's the lead auditor, who's the management person responsible for the follow-up. So we've largely so far conceived of that as just being probably a responsibility of the audit staff, or potentially Tammy once a month to go in and make sure people are notified. That's something we could approach with IAS to see whether it's possible to do that, to build in a function that would automatically alert people if there's an overdue date. All that development time costs money, so it's a question of like, is it worth it, or is it something we just try to manage ourselves? I think it's important that our team just get used to following up and their management, that we have to take on that responsibility, because it's not just a ping system. Email doesn't necessarily make us think about like, well, do we really, how are we approaching the follow-up? Do we need to do retesting, et cetera? So.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And, there's the cost benefit to all of technology. So I appreciate that too. And, and we just chatted earlier ahead of this too, as it relates to the compliance issue that we had earlier that's been following us. Sorry. The lawn, other people are now in my head. I'll just pass. Any other questions for the committee members? So sorry. Matt, I'll just talk to you offline about my last question because it's minor. So seeing none, then thank you, Matt, for your director's report. Really appreciate that. With no other questions, we're going to move it on to our technology asset management audit. And we've got our auditor in charge, Kevin Ely, who's with us, and our IT auditor, Timothy Larson. And unless, Matt, you want to say anything ahead of time, we can turn it over to them for their presentation.
I don't, other than I'll just, I think I saw Craig Bantz join the conversation as well, our CIO, so he'd be available for questions after the presentation.
Great.
Right. Madam Chair, members of the committee, let me just set the presentation up here and share. All right. Hello, thanks. My name again is Kevin Ely. I was the lead auditor on this audit, and Timothy Larson will be helping me on the presentation as well. So first we'll kind of set up some of the audit objectives for technology asset management. So first, our first objective was really to confirm and document inventory practices and technology asset management program maturity for council hardware and software. In doing so, the scope was really hardware and software asset management from May 1 of 2019 through December 30th of 2020. We additionally worked on getting management responses. So we did want to note that management responses are pending for this audit, but we did also get to review all of the findings and recommendations with management. So that is something that was completed. So observations. First, we wanted to note that our criteria for this really were the National Institute for Standards and Technology, the NIST framework for improving cybersecurity for critical infrastructure. And so the NIST CI for cybersecurity framework was the set of controls that we measured against, as well as using some ISACA guidance for background and also for some software licensure management. So observations. First, our procedures or work instructions did not exist to standardize the use of service tickets for asset deployment and disposal. Roles and responsibilities were not well defined or reviewed in procedures, work instructions, or job aids. We had some questions about materiality. So a lot of times there wasn't a materiality threshold that existed for policies and procedures. to say that, oh, this policy or procedure would activate for an asset that was valued at X, Y, or Z materiality. And there were no procedures or work instructions that existed regarding loaner equipment that were distributed during the pandemic for working remotely. Now, the council has taken certain actions to improve policies and procedures at the council level, but work instructions and job aids do live at the department and division level. So just thought that that was something that might be of interest. Next up, some of the risks associated with this, of course, are materially important assets could go missing, they could be lost, or they might be replaced before the end of their useful life. Otherwise, assets may be left active past the end of their useful life. Of course, without documenting things in procedures, work instructions, or job aids, institutional knowledge can be lost, which could cause further inconsistency or discontinuity. Policies and procedures and controls may not be reviewed periodically to confirm that the best technology security practices are in place. And divisions or departments may implement procedures or work instructions inconsistently, and control objectives may not be met. All right, so the next observation is regarding inventory systems. So one of the notes that we had was that assets were tracked along 7 different databases or manual systems across the council. So this was technology assets that we're speaking of. And of course, there were differences in the quality and completeness of attribute tracking between the inventory systems that are being used. So NIST puts forward a set of core attributes that we would be tracking. So their core attributes are listed here, as well as a set of supplemental attributes that are continued in supplemental guidance. So those are like cost, criticality of an asset, the sensitivity of the data on the asset. And so those are sort of the set of criteria, the asset attributes that we were looking at tracking and compared what we are tracking next to this, this standard. So some of the risks associated with inventory systems included that system controls may not adequately track all of the core attributes, which can limit the integrity of data, attribute data. Inventory data may not be sufficiently useful to inform decision-making and planning. And of course, a lack of inventory audits may make inventory data unreliable, which could negatively impact planning and life cycle management for technology.
And our next section is on lifecycle management. So here we observed a variety of practices being employed across the council, anything ranging from purely relying on institutional knowledge to relying on budget planning processes to having a handful of informal planning documents. The risks that we identified here kind of fell into 2 buckets, the first being security related risks with the physical asset itself, as well as the information on the asset. And then there were a variety of cost-related risks. So anything to do with maintaining older assets or unexpected failures, or just that the council may not be performing cost-effective planning. Next slide. And then we have configuration management. And so here we purely looked at configuration management at the time of the deployment of the asset. And similar to lifecycle management, there were a variety of approaches or practices being used. For the baseline configurations that did exist and that we observed, it wasn't necessarily based on any sort of formal or established documented procedure or checklist. It was primarily relying on the technician or the employee's professional experience. Additionally, we observed that no audits or reviews or verifications had been performed to confirm configuration settings were based on security practices. And then we couldn't find any document or procedure that outlined the separation of duties. So the risk here is that it just opens the council up to a variety of security threats. Moving on to asset disposal. So here the council uses 2 vendors to dispose of technology assets. The council had been using one particular vendor for a number of years prior to them obtaining their NAID certificate, which is the National Association for Information Destruction. The certificate itself is not necessarily a requirement, but it is considered good practice and it does meet the compliance requirements for HIPAA and PCI. Additionally, we also found that there were no policy or procedure or documents relating to how these vendors are managed. And there is something we identified fairly obvious. It's a loss or misuse of sensitive, secure, confidential information or data. that can result in litigation and or damage the council's reputation. Moving on to software licensure tracking. So other than Microsoft 365 licenses, the tracking and process or procedures around tracking software licenses is fairly minimal. And we found that no audits have been performed regarding software license tracking. So the council could be in a situation where we unintentionally are using more licenses than we say we are, which can result in fines, or we could be in a situation where we run out of licenses, which is an unexpected cost. Additionally, on the cost related, we note we could be in a situation where we're not being cost effective with planning for our licenses. And then finally, we have the IS sole source list. So this is exactly kind of what it sounds like. It's a list of vendors or suppliers that are considered sole source that provide a product or service. And so there is a process or processes around the sole source list itself. However, some of the details and information about how that list is maintained was not apparently clear. In late 2020, the procurement department created this sole source review team. And so they provided us with a number of documents that kind of outlined what they plan on doing and what they have been doing, and just generally how that process is going to look like, which definitely seems like or appears to be a step in the right direction. However, there are some concerns with how cost reasonableness is determined, as well as this process is still not officially a council procedure. And then additionally, there are some vendors that could be approved via the signature authority process versus a more lengthy sole source review approval process. The criteria here is a little different than what Kevin had noted earlier, where we took best practices from the federal acquisition regulations. And then the risks, so there's general inefficiencies and unnecessary expenses, but probably the more concerning one or more important is the potential perception or actual conflict of interest and accountability issues when the sole source process isn't as well documented or detailed. And with that, we'll take your questions.
Thank you for that report. I'll turn it back to the committee. Are there any questions at this time on this report? And I am trying to get to where I can see committee members' faces. There we go. Sorry. There we go. Back. All right. Council Member Galswick.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I had a question on the configuration management issue that you identified. I'm wondering if that was just related to personal computers, or are we talking about server configurations, or what types of configurations are we talking about related to that?
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilmember Goswick, we looked at a number of different configurations. So with respect to desktops, we did confirm the practices that were related to desktop computers that are issued by the IS department. And there are some standard approaches that are used. There is a sort of standard process and a set configuration that's deployed. But part of it was that there wasn't anything, any information available about how that standard configuration was arrived upon, and also a procedure that notes that at deployment, this is the configuration that's being deployed, this is how frequently it's reviewed. So that was, with respect to laptops, the situation. We did note that there are other configurations that exist for switches, routers, servers, and there are certain things that are in place, but it isn't necessarily easily documented how certain baseline configurations are deployed or arrived upon.
Any further? Oh, go ahead. Follow-up question. Sure.
Yep. One other. It's unrelated, but one other question. So, as it relates to the disposal of devices, do you know if there's any sort of sanitizing of the hard drives, et cetera, before it goes to the vendor that would reduce the risk, or are they going to the vendor in a form that'd be accessible, to the vendor? So either some sort of full disk encryption or something, or are they being wiped, I guess, before it goes over?
Madam Chair, Committee Member Gulswick, there is not, so the assets are collected via two different processes. One is in the Environmental Services Department, one is the IS department that is sort of they deal with asset disposal for the rest of the council with technology assets. We rely upon the vendor to do the secure destruction of hardware on any of these devices. So while the devices themselves are encrypted, you would have to log on, etc. The actual secure destruction happens at the vendor site. So yeah. But that could maybe be informed more by IS if there's more detail there that they would like to share.
Is there any additional information that IS would like to provide on that?
Yeah, this is Craig Bance. Thank you for the opportunity. IS does encrypt all of our devices that we manage when they're deployed. We do not delete or securely erase those devices before they are handed to the vendor, but under the terms of the agreement with the vendor, they are to do so in accordance with the standard previously referenced.
Thank you. Perfect.
Great. Are there any other questions? All right. Seeing none, I guess then we're on to just the last piece of business, and that is just letting you all know that we're going to have another audit committee meeting, and we'll propose dates later this fall. We'll select a date. Is there anything else, Matt, that you'd like to wrap up with before we adjourn?
I don't think so. I just a note on the audit committees. We've actually got a couple of jury duty segments to work around in the fall, and I've got to figure out whether we have too much for one meeting and maybe we'd have two. So stay tuned. We'll communicate probably in the next month or so about what to expect. But it would, the obligation will not be more than 2 meetings for sure. But it potentially might be easier to do it that way.
Thank you. And does the committee have any final comments that they'd like to make? All right, then, seeing none, thank you to everybody who's been on the meeting today. I appreciate all of the hard work that's been put into the reports, certainly continuing with our audit plan and moving forward with that. And, again, everybody for taking the time to be with us today. And with no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.